So let me I can keep the spiritual world up there, but I'm going to erase this. And this part, which is talk about, is waking up. In this section, we want to talk about waking up in the spiritual world. And Swedenborg says that he was able to experience this so that he could tell us about it. Now, what I'd like to do is read to you what he said. And if you want to follow along with this, it's on page 8 of Afterlife. I'm going to start at the very top and going to be reading for a while here and making some comments. I have not only been told how the awakening happens, I have been shown firsthand by experience. The actual experience happened to me so that I could have full knowledge of how this occurs. I was brought into a state in which my physical senses were inoperative, very much then like the state of people who are dying. However, my deeper life and the thought remained intact so that I could perceive and retain what was happening to me and what does happen to people who are being awakened from death. I'm skipping down a little bit, next paragraph. At first, then, a connection was established between my heartbeat and the heavenly kingdom. In some translations, he calls it the celestial kingdom, because that kingdom corresponds to the heart. I also saw angels from that kingdom, some at a distance, but two sitting close to my head. And I want you to remember that too, because that comes up in the near-death experience a lot, where people see guardian angels with them. Now, skipping over to page 9. The angels who were sitting beside my head were silent, simply sharing their thoughts with mine. When these are accepted by the deceased, the angels know that the person's spirit is ready to be let out of the body. They accomplished this sharing of thought by looking into my face. This is actually how thoughts are shared in heaven. We'll show you something about that in a second too. Since I had been left in possession of thought and perception so that I could learn and remember how awakening happens, I noticed that at first the angels were checking to see whether my thoughts were like those of a dying individual who are normally thinking about eternal life. They wanted to keep my mind in these thoughts. I was later told that as the body is breathing its last, our spirits are kept in its final thought until eventually it comes back to thoughts that flowed from our basic ruling or affection in the world. Especially was I enabled to perceive and even to feel that there was a pull, a kind of drawing out of the deeper level of my mind and therefore of my spirit from the body. And I was told that this was being done by the Lord alone during our resurrection. So at first, what you see here is that when Swedenborg is dying and then coming into that waking state in the other world, that there are these beautiful angels that are with him that are full of nothing but love. And they are speaking to him or putting into his mind thoughts of peace and love by thought transfer, by just simply inducing these things into his mind in his own freedom to think about them. Now, after this happens, Swedenborg talks about something which seems really strange. But it's not if you really listen carefully. He said, after this happened, the angels rolled back a covering from my left eye toward the center of my nose so that my eye was open and able to see. I could see a kind of clear but dim light, like the light we see through the eyelids when we are first awakening. It seemed to me as though this clear, dim light had a heavenly color to it. Angels take the greatest care to shield the awakening person from any concept that doesn't taste of love. But then the spiritual angels give us the use of light. Now, I skipped a little bit in there, but I wanted to bring a couple of things to mind. Again, this idea of love, that it's all about love when the person wakes up in this other world. And also it talks about that something was rolled off the left eye. Well, he says in here and elsewhere that that's an appearance. It's just something that corresponds or symbolizes what is happening to the person. And that is that, as you can think about a covering being taken off your eye, he said he was then able to begin to see. And he said first he just saw a very dim light, but that it became brighter and brighter until he was given the use of light. And then he goes on later, we'll see, to talk about that light and the brilliance of that light and how it just filled his whole mind with understanding. So that's important because in some ways that might, again, fit with the near-death experience and what we're talking about here. Now, what I'd like to do is go into a whole bunch of just ideas about here's what Swedenborg says and here's what people who have the near-death experience say. So now I'd like to introduce you to a little game that we have on this page, I hope, or some link to it. But what it is you're going to read a whole section out of here, what we just were talking about, and you're going to pick out all the similarities that you see between what Swedenborg says and what people who have had the near-death experience say. There's a ton of them, so go enjoy yourself.